Hello and welcome to this week's updates and Q&A from myself about what's been happening in politics, in the Dáil in particular, but also in general. How's Paul today? I'm all right. I'm okay, yeah. Maybe there's a couple of things I want to speak about. Obviously, please feel free to like, share, but also put in questions, and I'll do my best to get to any that I can. There's two things that I wanted to talk about in particular, which was the motion we had earlier about disability rights and disability justice, which passed, thankfully. But I'll explain, that doesn't automatically mean that they do that the government does what is contained in the motion that they just voted for. But I'll go through that. And then the other thing, if I get time, is to talk about the campaign to save the post office in Tallaght and to oppose the privatisation agenda of An Post across the country. Just to start with the motion we had earlier, and someone there, unsub, has the question that gets to the heart of it: has the green paper been scrapped? The answer is yes. So the green paper is a paper that was launched by the government last year about reforming disability payments, basically creating a tiered system of payments based on your capacity of working, how capable you are of working. It was done under the guise of, those who are least able to work will get increased payments. Those who are most able to work, they won't see any reduction in payments whatsoever. But in reality, it was about moving to a kind of Tory type system, the system they have in Britain. If you've seen the film I, Daniel Blake, you know what it's about, where people have to go through these work capability assessments run by private firms over and over again to prove that they're sufficiently not able to work to be able to keep getting payments. It's about really creating a category of kind of deserving people, disabled people, and undeserving disabled people. That was what it was about, and really a precursor to then making cuts to the basic rate of payment by justifying, you're well able to work, you don't need this payment. So the Green Paper was launched without any consultation beforehand, before they launched these proposals with disabled persons' organisations, and then met a chorus of opposition and very strong campaigning by disabled people. In the Dáil previously, people might remember I raised it with Leo Varadkar, and I referenced I, Daniel Blake, and I asked whether Varadkar had seen it, and kind of summed up the approach of the government. He said, I've seen it all right, and it's a good movie, but it's a one-sided movie. And to get the other side of the story, you should watch Benefit Street. In other words, suggesting that there's a load of people scamming the system on disability, etc., etc. So that's what this was about. The government, we had this motion down for debate and vote today, and the government on Friday announced that they're scrapping the Green Paper. So that's very, very welcome, because our motion calls for the scrapping of the Green Paper. That's a victory for all those campaigners who have been part of the coalition fighting against it. But just to go through then, our motion wasn't just about the Green Paper. It's like a 2-page motion. Check it out online on the Oireachtas website. But I'll go through, effectively at the end, there are 6 core asks, calls on the government to. Right. Number 1 is immediately scrap the Green Paper on disability reform, to genuinely consult with disabled people about any reforms and commit to no linking of payments to work. Secondly, introduce a system of non-means tested universal payments that cover the real costs of having a disability, which, by the way, are about €10,000 or more a year, and provide income security to disabled people. So the rates of unemployment, the rates of homelessness, the rates of poverty, rates of deprivation are massively higher amongst disabled people than the population at large. Third demand, introduce a guaranteed living wage for carers that is not means tested. People presumably know carers allowance is means tested. It's also inadequate. The state saves billions of euros a year. Globally, capitalism saves $11 trillion a year by unpaid, free care work done in the home. Fourthly, massively expand personal assistance hours as a right to ensure that there is personal assistance to all who need to study, work, socialise and live a full life, and guarantee the personal assistants have decent paying conditions. Fifthly, immediately ratify the optional protocol to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That would mean that people could take cases, basically, against the Irish government if their rights are not being met. And sixthly, a constitutional amendment to assert equality for disabled people and to guarantee for all the rights to supports needed to fully engage in society as a basic democratic right. So that motion was passed this morning, just before 12 o'clock. That's welcome. The problem is, like, how it passes is the government didn't put an amendment, a counter motion, and they didn't vote against it. So everyone who voted in favour of it. And so it passes. That is now legally, well, kind of politically, that is the position of the Dáil, is to call for all of those things. The problem is, and this is how cynical the government is, like, as it stands, the government doesn't have any intention of doing any of those things, apart from the one they've already done of scrapping the Green Paper, and they've said something about ratifying the optional protocol, but it's always like moving towards doing it. It's like something that's coming down the line as opposed to actually go and do it now. But they don't intend to bring in a non-means tested universal payments for people with disabilities. They don't intend to introduce a guaranteed living wage. They don't intend to massively expand personal assistance hours, and they don't intend to have a constitutional referendum to assert equality and rights, have a rights-based approach for disabled people. So it's a good thing that it's passed, but we now have to use that to put pressure on the government to say we need to move on these things. The Dáil has now voted for these things. We need to move on it. And there was good protest outside by the coalition of groups against the Green Paper, emphasising those things, in particular the need for non-means tested universal payments. So that's a good sign of how the pressure is going to continue on the government, and in the Dáil we will definitely try to be a voice for that and continue to raise that. Someone accuses me of sitting on the fence my whole life. I think that's the first time I've ever been accused of sitting on the fence, Eileen. So thanks a lot. You might tell me how on earth you think I'm sitting on the fence. People normally give out that I'm not sitting on the fence. Come here, I might just mention one other thing and then go through some of the questions, if that's okay. The other thing I just want to mention quickly is a very important protest this Saturday, 1 o'clock, beside Rua Red in Tallaght, beside the Lewis stop in Tallaght, to save Tallaght Post Office. So Tallaght Post Office is one of 6, I think, post offices across the country. There's Rathmines, there's Phibsborough, there's Tallaght, there's... It is 2 o'clock, is it? You sure it's 2 o'clock? Yeah, okay, apparently it's definitely 2 o'clock. Confused between, because I think the Palestine protest is at 1 o'clock. So 2 o'clock at Rua Red, thank you. This anonymous assistance in the background. 2 o'clock at Rua Red to save Tallaght Post Office. So it's one of 6 post offices. Tallaght, Phibsborough, Rathmines, one in Tipperary, one in Roscommon, and one in New Ross, which are all facing privatisation. So this is a privatisation agenda of An Post. What it'll mean in the case of Tallaght and most of the others is that the current post office, which is at the square, will close down. It will reopen in a different location, but in the different location, it'll be smaller, and the current Tallaght Post Office is absolutely packed. It's always out the door. It will have less counters, it will have less staff, and it will have less services. So a much worse experience for those who use the Tallaght Post Office, which is loads of people, and the workers are treated abysmally. They're only being given the choice. It's not a choice when you have one option. They're being told they're going to be relocated elsewhere in Dublin. It looks like they'll be going to beside the Three Arena. The vast majority of them, I think nearly all of them, I think, live in Tallaght, work in Tallaght, and are now are faced with commuting into town and out of town every day. No consultation, etc., etc. That's the first step. The second step is that it could get even worse than that. Once it's privatised, there's no guarantee it won't go entirely. In the last few years, quite recently, the post office in Rathfarnham has gone. A few years ago, the post office in Temple Oak went. And across the country, about 200 post offices have closed over the course of the last 5 years. They're all the privatised post offices. So this is just the first step, unfortunately. And then, like I say, the same is happening in 5 other post offices across the country. So there is in Tallaght a very successful campaign. We launched a campaign to save Tallaght Post Office. Over 1,000 people have signed the petition online. Similar numbers have signed petitions to save the other post offices. We had a great public meeting last week, and then there's this protest coming up on Saturday, like I said, 2 o'clock, beside Rua Red, to try and save our post office. It's really, really vital, because if we lose at this stage, will already get significantly worse services, and then after that the post office can go entirely. So just to fly through some of the questions. Right, come here, let me go up to start and try and work through them. Give me a second. Why should I vote PBP this time round? Good question, Miami Nick. I like your name. Why? Because the local and European elections, which is 7 weeks away, gives us a unique opportunity to kick Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael out of the councils, out of the European Parliament, and to send the government a message, effectively to serve an eviction notice on the government that your time is just about up. And People Before Profit and Solidarity are the only parties that are clearly saying we will not go into coalition with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. We need a fundamental change, and that goes at a local level too. So someone asked, I saw secondly, would you go into government with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael if some of your policies were met? No. Look at the history of the Green Party, the Labour Party going into government with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. You will not find a single example of a supposedly progressive party going into government and delivering on what people voted for it for. You're in government to provide a mudguard for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. They're there to represent the big corporate landlords. They're there to represent the big private developers. They're there to represent the big polluting corporations. And they will be using their power in government to stop the kind of socialist change that we need to see. So we need a government without those parties. We need a left government committed to taking on the 1% who are in power in this country. Why is Simon Harris against people my age being able to rent our own homes? Well, like in theory he's not. If you said that to him, he's the TikTok Taoiseach after all. He would tell you that he's all for you, and he made a speech about getting the children out of the box room. But in practice, his policies obviously are against that. Why so? Because fundamentally he rules in the interests of the big developers, the private landlords, not in the interests of those who are affected by the housing crisis. So he rules in the interests of those who benefit from the housing crisis, not those who lose from it, which is the vast majority. A good example of this, one of the first things he's done as Taoiseach is to basically agree, he confirmed to me in the Dáil yesterday, that they're going to waive development levies. So these are development levies paid by developers. They've done it for a year already. They're going to waive it for another year. That's a cost of over 300 million euros to the public, right? 300 million euros is going to be basically left in the pockets of the big private developers as opposed to being used to just build houses. And that sums up their approach, is like, give money, give incentives to the developers, give incentives to the corporate landlords, and hope that that translates into housing, as opposed to, let's develop a state construction company, let's use public land, and let's build social and genuinely affordable homes. Someone asked, are you in support of the EU Migration Pact? I'm not. I think it's absolutely scandalous what is being done, where they're going to lock up children. They're going to create detention centres in Dublin Airport. They're going to lock children up who come here, not going to allow them to go to school. It is absolutely horrendous what is taking place. They are dramatically minimising the basic right of people to asylum. They're minimising and they're like raising the borders of Fortress Europe. Thousands more people will die as a consequence of that, will drown in the Mediterranean. It's absolutely horrific. It isn't going to make your life any better, isn't going to make the life of anyone in Europe any better. It's just going to make the lives of some people much, much harder and tragically shorter in some cases, as opposed to dealing with the fundamental causes of migration, which, like European capitalism, imperialism, bears a very large responsibility for in terms of war, authoritarian regimes, climate change, and so on. Philip says, will you answer the question? Fire it in again there. Will Ireland turn into a concrete landscape? No green spaces, all the houses need to be built. I think we need to have lots of green spaces. There's no question about that. We need to build livable communities. One way of doing that is to address the issue of the vacant properties, the 166,000 vacant properties. It's over 50,000 that have been vacant for 6 years or more. So, we should immediately use those. But we can also build homes and livable communities. Any help for mature students? We have different needs, obstacles than other students, nothing to help. I absolutely agree with you. Hi, are you interested in passive income from crypto? No, thank you, Arthur from Castlebar. Simon Harris has a better TikTok than you. Oh no. Small parties of FFFG can manage to get things that they want, but they do tend to disappear fold after. I don't agree. They get small things. When you look at the Green Party, they've gotten small things. They've gotten some cycle lanes. But like, the reason they went in was just like, oh, this massive climate crisis. We need to go in. We need to like have action. You look at our climate emissions, we're like at the bottom of the European table in terms of actually going towards our targets. They've signed up to data centres, signed up to LNG, signed up to all sorts of stuff that like, in theory, they're meant to be against. So I think they've betrayed the environmental movement. I think the Labour Party betrayed the trade union movement when it went into power before. Can PBP and SF form a coalition? Seems like there are big gaps between your policies. There certainly are big gaps between our policies. We'll see. Our attitude is we have a series of far-reaching red lines in terms of €15 an hour minimum wage, stop the use of Shannon Airport by the US military, scrap the Industrial Relations Act, taking the big polluting companies into public ownership, the big developers into public ownership. If those measures, which would amount to a government that is committed to fighting for eco-socialist change, are agreed with Sinn Féin, we would join the government. If not, we would still vote for a Sinn Féin candidate for Taoiseach. We'd vote for every positive proposal they brought forward and vote against the negative stuff. Do you think Fianna Fáil are really that bad, Paul? I think they've done some good things. Yeah, I do. I think they're really bad. We don't need new houses, we need new towns. Well, both. What cycle lanes shit bring more pollution to city centre? Philip, what is the question? You keep asking me to answer the question. You need to put the question in. Please go away, please. I think there's a button where you can just, up the top somewhere, you can just scroll on. Just scroll on away if I want me to go away. Very, very easy. No, clause supply about mature students. Check out our last manifesto and our budget for our proposals in relation to mature students. One side road, cycle lane, the other road down. Any advice for young people holding off emigrating but feeling forced to? I mean, I feel it. I don't blame you if you do decide to emigrate. But I would say, like, the world over, we live in this capitalist system where profit comes first, where people come last, and the world over, these problems, you know, while it's true that different crises are at different stage in different countries, you won't be able to escape this capitalist system, and I do encourage you, wherever you go, to fight against it. Philip, you keep saying 70th time, but I've not seen the question. The noise is annoying, Paul. Oh yeah, think about how I feel. That's the bell that comes on very regularly in here to say that the Dáil is about to start, there's a vote, there's a Shannon, committees, etc., etc. Cost of living to stay here, yeah. Horrendous. On WHO, Philip. Who? Public health v private. Public health, 100%, that's what we need. It's like the housing crisis. If there wasn't a public health crisis, these profiteers couldn't make any money out of our health service. That's who benefits, the big Larry Goodman, big insurance companies, and so on. Policies regarding the Irish language, very much pro the Irish language. Check out Rupture website, we have a couple of interesting articles, and check out PBP policy on our website. Stuck on homeless, happy, 8 years in disability, nightmare. Feel free to send me an email, paul.murphy@oireachtas.ie. Paul, do I own a lazy bike or an electric bike? I don't know what a lazy bike is. I don't own an electric bike, I own a regular bike. Why do I never say positive things about our great country? One of the best countries per OECD, is that right? I think Ireland's great. I think people in Ireland are great. I think we have a great tradition and history of standing up for the oppressed worldwide. You look at the very massive protests in support of Palestine in Ireland. I think that says something very, very positive. You look at our struggle against British imperialism. That says very positive. You look at the likes of James Connolly, you know, and like, who was widely respected, and he's like a prominent revolutionary socialist. There's loads of things that are great about this country, but I also don't buy into the idea that you have to just shut up about all the bad things. There's lots and lots of bad things as well. Was the bill passed yesterday? What bill yesterday? You mean the Asylum Pact? Is that right? If that was what you were asking about, Philip, don't knock on my door. I'll try not to. The Asylum Pact, so yesterday there was a vote. We called for a full debate to happen about it at this stage before it goes to committee. The government opposed that, so the government won their vote on it. But that just means it goes to committee, and then at a later stage it comes before the Dáil. The question of what Ireland signs up for will come on later. Kiki, I'm sorry for you and Cavan. It's just no 3 ain't 2 candidates, but no PPP. Consider joining People for Profit and righting that wrong. I spoke earlier about Sinn Féin PPP coalition. Someone's asking, what's the deal with the bill on the right to remove you from your housing bill? So this is crazy that there's a couple of people shared lies about our bill. One of the guys is a landlord, claiming that our bill is about evicting people, and this kind of madness. So our bill is about the right to housing being put in the Constitution, to say that the right of ordinary people to housing should come before the right of big corporate landlords to make as much profit as possible. Because when, for example, we say there should be an eviction ban, or we say there should be proper rent controls to bring rents down, the government says, no, we can't do that because right to private property is in the Constitution, and they say that trumps everything else. Whereas we're saying people should have a right to housing, and that should be in the Constitution. It's definitely not about removing you from your housing. Do we have many people running in the elections? We do. I think we're kind of around the 50 mark. We're around 50 in local elections, which is not bad. Someone asked, was the bill passed yesterday? There was no bill passed yesterday, no. I'm a TD. Someone asked earlier, what am I TD for? I'm TD for People Before Profit and for Dublin South West. How could a socialist government work under a worldwide capitalist system? You need to fight for worldwide socialist change, but that can start with a left government fighting for socialist change in one particular country, but we need to absolutely spread it. But all the evidence is that when you have revolutionary changes taking place, it is likely to spread to other countries. Just most recently, you look at the so-called Arab Spring, and revolution jumped from country to country. In the end, ultimately, there was counter-revolutions. The hopes and aspirations of those people who kicked out horrible dictatorships were mostly disappointed. But the point about it being internationalised, it actually went worldwide. It inspired the Occupy movement in America, the Indignados movement in Southern Europe, the Squares movement in Greece, and movements in this country. It shows that where you have a movement that can actually inspire people that things could be fundamentally different. Everybody could have a right to housing. Everybody could have a right to decent healthcare. Everybody could have a right to decent education. Those things are very, very basic. That will inspire people in other countries as well. All right. I saw that about Judge Nolan. All right. Pretty outrageous. All right, I'll answer what do I think about reform the cost of insurance? What we need is a state-run, not-for-profit insurance company. It's a huge rip-off by the insurance companies. I mean, we went into this in detail when I was on the finance committee a few years ago. There's massive profits being made. So they try and blame all sorts of factors as to why people's insurance costs are up. But that is the essential reason, is massive profiteering. Proudest achievement as a TD? I'll leave it on this one. That's a nice question, like a soft one. I think the role that I played together with, and predominantly the movement against water charges, but the role I played in helping to build a massive movement of civil disobedience, 73% of people refusing to pay, and defeating the water charges. That was people power in action, and I think hopefully a good example of how, as a TD, it's not that you bring about change on your own, you really don't, but you can help to build mass movements. That is what ultimately changes society. All right. I will leave it there for now. Feel free to come back next week and ask the questions that you have. Yeah. Nice to talk to you all. Good questions in there, but I can't go on forever. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.